Welcome to the deep dive. We take your sources, dig in, and really pull out the core insights for you.
And those surprising details, too. So you don't have to wade through it all.
Exactly. Today, we're looking at a news report covering some pretty serious severe weather that hit North Georgia and the metro Atlanta area recently.
Yeah, the source is an article from FOX5 Atlanta. And it gives a really detailed, minute-by-minute almost, look at the forecast and how things actually played out.
Okay, so our mission here is to walk you through the key stuff from that report, the timing, the specific threats they mentioned, the impacts people felt. Basically make sense of it quickly.
Because these weather events, they affect a lot of people. Power goes out, plans change, it's disruptive.
Right. Whether you were, directly in the path or just curious, understanding how these things are reported, like in this article, is pretty important. It tells you a lot about preparedness, forecasting.
Okay. So where do we start? The big picture.
Yeah, let's set the scene. The article kicks off by saying this wasn't just like a quick afternoon storm. There was a threat of severe weather moving through starting Saturday, May 24th.
And potentially lasting right through Tuesday the 27th. So multiple days, multiple rounds of storms were expected.
So what kind of threats were they talking about initially in the original story part of the article?
Well, they flagged a few main things. Gusty winds were definitely a big one.
And they didn't just say gusty, did they? I remember seeing a specific number.
They did, up to 70 miles per hour, which is, definitely enough to cause some damage. Trees, power lines.
Yeah, for sure. What else?
Moderate hail was mentioned, and also intense downpours, heavy rain.
Which, of course, brings the risk of localized flooding, right? Especially if areas get hit repeatedly.
Exactly. The report does note that while there were some isolated tornado warnings back on Saturday, the forecast chance, the overall probability, was actually expected to go down by Sunday evening.
Okay, but then Sunday evening itself, sounds like things got pretty active based on the updates in the article.
Oh, absolutely. Even with that lower overall chance, the situation on the ground, or rather in the sky, definitely ramped up. Let's trace how the report shows that escalation.
Okay, so Sunday evening arrives, the reporting shifts. They mention a severe thunderstorm watch being issued. For folks maybe not as familiar, a watch, that means conditions are right, basically.
Exactly. Conditions are favorable. Doesn't mean it's happening right this second everywhere, but the ingredients are there for severe storms to develop over the next few hours. This one was until midnight.
And it covered a pretty big chunk of Georgia.
Yeah, lots of counties, including several key metro Atlanta ones, Gwinnett, Fulton, Cobb, DeKalb, and others listed around the area. It was a heads up, basically.
Gotcha. But then things move from watch to warning. And a warning is more immediate, right? It means take cover.
Precisely. A warning means a severe thunderstorm is happening or is about to happen in a specific smaller zone. Time for action.
And the article lists several of these warnings for Sunday evening.
It does, with specific timings. Like for those core metro counties, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, Gwinnett, there was a warning until 9:15 p.m.
Okay.
Earlier warnings were out for places a bit north and west. Cherokee, Bartow, Pickens. And then specific cities like Rome, Dalton, Calhoun were mentioned in warnings that expired around 7:30 p.m.
So you see this progression, these warnings popping up as storms fire up and move.
Right. But here's where it gets particularly noteworthy, especially given that earlier forecast mention of a decreasing chance.
What's that?
Actual tornado warnings were issued on Sunday evening in some spots. The article specifically names counties like Bartow, Gordon, Floyd, Walker, Chattooga.
Wow, okay. So specific towns were under the gun?
Yeah, it mentioned Adairsville, Rome, Calhoun being in those warned areas. It really highlights how localized and, suddenly dangerous these situations can become.
It really does. Was there a specific storm they tracked?
Yes. There's this fascinating detail from a 6:45 p.m. update in the article. It said a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located very precisely 9 miles northeast of Somerville at 6:42 p.m., moving southeast at 40 miles per hour. That kind of real-time tracking info in the report is pretty intense.
Absolutely. Seeing that, a specific storm cell with rotation moving towards you, that makes the warning very real. And the updates continued.
They did. There's a 9 p.m. update the article mentions, noting a potentially tornadic thunderstorm cell. So one showing rotation that was also producing hail and moving into DeKalb and Gwinnett.
So the threat was shifting, moving across the metro.
Right. And then even later at 10 p.m., the report kind of circles back, reminding everyone that the broader severe thunderstorm watch for most of the metro was still active until midnight.
So you get this layered picture from the source, the broad potential, then the specific urgent warnings as storms hit, including that tornado threat.
Exactly. It shows the evolution clearly.
So with all that activity, the high winds, the hail, the possible tornadoes, what did the article say about the immediate impacts? What actually happened?
Well, the most direct impact mentioned, and it's something that always hits home, was power outages.
Right. Annoying at best, dangerous at worst.
For sure. The article stated that both North Georgia EMC and Georgia Power had customers reporting outages. North Georgia EMC specifically said their crews would be working around the clock to restore power.
And Georgia Power?
Their outage maps, according to the report, showed about 600 customers affected in that same North Georgia area. So definite, tangible consequences from the storms.
Okay, so that covers Sunday night's immediate punch. But the article also looked ahead, right? What did it say about Monday and Tuesday?
Yeah, it didn't stop Sunday night. The source indicated rain chances would stick around into Monday.
And the severe threat wasn't over either.
Not according to the forecast they cited. It actually got pretty specific about the next expected line of potentially strong storms.
When was that supposed to be?
Between about 10 p.m. Sunday night and 1 a.m. Monday morning, so another overnight event.
Yeah.
And the report suggested the peak intensity would likely be after midnight.
And then looking even further into Monday.
Another wave was possible Monday night. The timing there was forecast between, say, 9 p.m. and midnight Monday, maybe spilling into early Tuesday.
And what were the threats with those later waves? Same stuff.
Pretty much. The article mentioned the potential for more intense wind gusts, heavy rain again, and maybe some small hail with those later systems.
Did it offer any hope for a break?
A little bit. It mentioned a possible brief lull in the rain late Monday morning through the early afternoon. Just a maybe, though.
Okay. What about the overall risk level? Did the article mention those categories like marginal, slight?
It did. It said most of Georgia was under a level 1, which is marginal risk. That means, isolated severe storms are possible.
But some areas were higher.
Yes, specifically parts of West Georgia. Their risk was bumped up to a level 2 or slight risk.
And level 2 means just a greater chance.
A greater likelihood, yeah. Not widespread necessarily, but a higher probability of severe storms occurring in those designated level 2 areas compared to level 1.
Got it. Did they mention temperatures at all? Just curious.
Briefly. Just noted pretty typical seasonal temps, low 80s for highs, upper 60s overnight, but really the focus was clearly on the storm potential.
And the main takeaway for the next couple of days was just more potential trouble.
Essentially, yes. The report wrapped up the forecast saying rain and storm chances would likely continue into Tuesday, possibly even beyond, with those repeated threats, damaging winds, lightning, heavy rain.
Okay. And amidst all this forecasting and warning, did the article include any advice for people?
Absolutely. Standard but crucial advice. It stressed monitoring real-time updates.
Which makes sense given how quickly things were changing.
Totally. And having multiple ways to get alerts, like don't just rely on one thing. Using a weather app was suggested. And of course, avoiding being outdoors during active warnings.
And did the source explain why staying alert was so important in this specific situation?
It did. It put it out that the storm strength and the exact timing were still pretty variable in the forecasts. There were inconsistencies, apparently.
Okay.
So because of that variability, that uncertainty, the risk for sudden severe weather remained high. Things could change quickly.
Right. So summarizing this deep dive into the FOX5 report, we got a picture of a multi-day severe weather event affecting North Georgia and Atlanta. The source laid out the initial threats like high winds and hail.
Then detailed that significant escalation on Sunday evening, the watches turning into warnings, including those specific tornado warnings that popped up despite the earlier forecast.
We saw the immediate impacts like the power outages reported by the utility companies.
And the source looked ahead, outlining the continued risks for Monday and Tuesday, highlighting specific timing for potential storm waves and the different risk levels across the state.
And finally, that crucial safety advice, emphasizing vigilance because the situation was still so dynamic.
Yeah. And connecting back to something you just mentioned, the source itself kind of hinted at the forecasting challenge. It noted models showed inconsistencies.
Right, yeah.
But the energy was definitely there in the atmosphere for severe weather. And that variability in strength and timing was precisely why the risk of sudden dangerous weather stayed high.
Which leaves us with something to think about, really, drawing from this source. This whole event, as reported, is a perfect example of how weather can be so dynamic, so unpredictable, almost right down to the wire. Forecasters know the ingredients are there, but pinpointing exactly when and how strong is incredibly tough.
Yeah.
And that makes it absolutely essential for us, as individuals to stay alert and prepared, even if the forecast a day or two out isn't perfectly set in stone. That uncertainty is part of the reality.